And content of this show are those of the host, guests, and callers. They do not necessarily reflect those of Local Matters Broadcasting LLC, its owners, partners, affiliates, assigns, or heirs. Having said that, it's now time to say good morning, St. Johns County. Welcome to the weekly radio show of the St. Johns County Council on Aging, better known in our community as the COA. We are your local nonprofit agency who, for the past 51 years, has been leading and advocating for the dignity and independence of seniors and responding to their changing needs. I'm Brian Robinson, Program Director for COA, broadcasting to you live from the studio of WFOY 102.1 FM, your local radio station for news, sports, and talk. Before we get into our show, let me remind everyone that if you have a question, comment, or a suggestion for a radio show topic, or if you just want to compliment me on my amazing hairstyle, well, you can send your email to radio@coasjc.org. Again, that's radio@coasjc.org. Retired Brigadier General Mike Fleming was originally scheduled to join us on this morning's show, and he just couldn't be with us. He's out of town on business. So anyways, joining us in his place are Nick Howland, Executive Director of the Fire Watch, and Alex Field, Clinic Director of the Stephen A. Cohen Military Family Clinic at Centerstone in Jacksonville, Florida. I wonder, does that all fit on your name tag?
It does not.
All right. Well, good morning to both of you. Thank you for joining us. I know both of you drove from the Jacksonville area, and it took about 45 minutes to an hour to get down here. And I always send pictures with my directions for people to come to this station because it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So I hope that the directions helped get you here, and thank you so much. What I would love for each of you to do in our first segment is just, take your time, tell our audience about yourself, first of all, and then the organization that you serve, and then why you are passionate about serving veterans. And so, Alex, we'll start with you.
Okay, great. My name is Alex Field. I'm the clinic director, like you said, of the Stephen A. Cohen Military Family Clinic at Centerstone. So I am a licensed clinical social worker. I've been working in the field of mental health for about 13 years. Most of my experience has been as a trauma therapist, so working with folks who have experienced, children who have experienced abuse or neglect, or people who have experienced sexual assault, and eventually made my way continuing to work with folks who have experienced trauma, which is with veterans. So I work with the Cohen Clinic at Centerstone. We serve veterans, active duty service members, reservists, National Guard, and any family member of any of those folks. So it could be their child, it could be their spouse, it could be their caregiver. We do individual, group, couples, and family therapy. We do targeted treatment. So what that means is it's more of a short-term program between 3 and 5 months where we treat issues like depression, anxiety, relationship issues, parenting and child-related issues, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, among other things, grief. And we work with folks to address these things so that they're living a healthy and happy life moving forward. I started working with veterans, like I said, because of my experience as a trauma therapist, but also because I have family who have been in the military as well. So it's important to me to give back to the community and serve those who have served.
Fantastic. All right, Nick?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian. Nick Howland, I'm a Navy veteran and executive director of the Fire Watch, which we call ourselves Florida's Fight to End Veteran Suicide. It was started right here, Northeast Florida, in 2019, and some of the folks who started it, myself included, were Rory Diamond, who was a city councilman up in Jacksonville, Jeremiah Blocker, who at the time was the St. Johns County commissioner, and of course, as you mentioned, General Mike Fleming, who's probably one of the most well-known and respected veteran advocates across the entire state of Florida.
Absolutely.
And he's our chairman at the Fire Watch. So I mentioned we're Florida's Fight to End Veteran Suicide. We're trying to do that, Brian, by prevention. So our whole organization 5 years ago when we were founded, we sat around a whiteboard up at Canines for Warriors. Dan Bean, who's currently CEO of Canines for Warriors, was involved as well. And we whiteboarded out how we would do that. We were inspired by CPR. So we're founded basically on three premises. One, that suicide is preventable. Two, that if we can get a veteran to the help they need before they slip into crisis, we can prevent it. And three, and probably most importantly, that it takes the community to get involved. You see a lot of veteran organizations that are veterans helping veterans. The third premise of ours is that we think it takes the broader community. So we launched a program, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, a lot today, called the Watchstander Program. We're asking community members to stand watch for veterans. We're doing, again, inspired by CPR, we're training them to recognize the signs of crisis, ask that veteran if they need help, and get them to the help they need. We launched that in early 2020, and right here in Northeast Florida within Clay, Baker, St. John's, Nassau, and Duval. And 5 years later, we've reached 10,000 members of the community have taken the training, standing there for veterans, ready to refer them to services. So just like CPR trains you to recognize those signs and call for help quick, our Watchstander program, short 30 to 40-minute training, online or in person, you can do it at thefirewatch.org, trains you to recognize those signs and get people to help quick. And one of our most referred resources is Alex's, the Cohen Clinic up in Jacksonville, which is, again, a free clinic offering mental health services that is no or little cost and absolutely confidential. So we find that a lot of folks, we refer a lot to the VA, but if they don't want to use the VA, they also go to Cohen Clinic. So wonderful service. Glad to have Alex here with me today.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm so excited to have both of you on the show. You know, every year I try to do a veterans theme show. Veterans Day was just this past Tuesday. I have a heart for veterans. My dad served in the Marine Corps. He was in during the Korea War. He was stationed at Camp David, and he played the trumpet in the President's Band. So and once a Marine, always a Marine, right? I heard that all my life growing up, and he loved it. He was only in for 3 years, but it just was something that stuck with him for his whole life. And then my brother served in the Air Force, made a career out of it, retired as a lieutenant colonel. I have a cousin who was in the Marine Corps, made a career of it, retired as a colonel. A couple other cousins that served in the Army, and so just I've been around those who serve in the military, and so I have a big heart for our veterans. And so thank you both for coming on the show. I have some more questions that we're going to get into, but we're going to go ahead. We're going to take our first commercial break at this time, and we'll continue our conversation here shortly. Right after these messages, we'll be right back. And welcome back to the weekly radio show, the St. Johns County Council on Aging, here on WFOY 102.1 FM. Your local radio station for news, sports, and talk. I'm Brian Robinson, Program Director for COA, joined this morning by Nick Howland, the Executive Director of the Firewatch, and Alex Field, Clinic Director of the Stephen A. Cohen Military Family Clinic at Centerstone in Jacksonville, Florida. And in the first segment, they were both introducing themselves and talking about their organizations and why they love serving veterans. So I want to jump into our list of questions here that I have. According to Pew Research, there are more than 18 million living veterans in the United States, representing about 6% of the country's adult population. One would think that serving 6% of our adult population would be a task that our government could easily handle. However, there are still some reports that indicate that the Department of Veteran Affairs is still struggling to provide our veterans with timely health care. And I'm just wondering, is this still the case? Are you still finding that to be the case for our veterans?
Well, the VA is a great partner of ours. We often exchange referrals back and forth between, and we'd love to see some more funding for the VA. But in the meantime, the Cohen Clinic actually has immediate access to care. So we try to fill any gaps that there may be for veterans. You can call our clinic and get immediate services within 24 to 48 hours. Be seen by a licensed therapist within 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with Alex. I mentioned before that the Firewatch is built on prevention. We want to try to prevent veteran suicide, and the whole purpose of our program is to get people to those services like the Cohen Clinic or like the VA. And I think when they're treated, they have wonderful results, and that's why we're seeing, along with our referrals going up, we're seeing veteran suicides come down in certain places of the state of Florida. But one of the issues with the VA, and it's not a knock on them at all, is that the VA is built around treatment, not prevention. There was a Secretary, Wilkie, under the first Trump administration who recognized that and said, look, we keep pouring more money into mental health treatment. Why don't we start looking at addressing issues in veterans before they slip into crisis? And he created, with the president, something called the Prevents Task Force that stands for the President's Roadmap to End the Veteran Tragedy of Suicide. And they had about a year where they worked together, and what came out of it was that they need to involve community stakeholders more. You mentioned 6% of America is served. They talked about addressing, and engaging the other 94% to help the 6%. And that's really what became the basis of our organization, launched around the same time as Secretary Wilkie's discussion. That is to get folks to the help they need. And hopefully we can get them address their early symptoms before they even need mental health treatment, or address their early symptoms before they even need severe medical treatment. It's very similar to the healthcare mantra of address the social determinants of health, in order to prevent having to do significant emergency or other urgent treatment at a later date.
Yeah. And I want to just stay on the topic of suicide. I've always been open and honest about my struggle with depression. I've been struggling with depression since I was a teenager. There's been different times throughout my life that I've thought about suicide, never attempted it. I'm 53 years old, and when I was a teenager, the stigma was such that I was too embarrassed to seek help, right? I did not get help until my 30s. So I suffered silently with my depression for many, many years. And, thankfully I eventually got help, and, I'm in the best physical and mental health of my life right now, right? And it's because I decided to take that step to get the help that I needed. And so, unfortunately, the stigma is still there. And so I try to do my part to say, hey, it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to seek help, right? And so in doing some research for our show this morning, the website stopsoldiersuicide.org says that veterans are 72% more likely to commit suicide than those who never served, and that suicide is the second leading cause of death in veterans under the age of 45. So if you would, tell our listeners about the incredible work that your organizations are doing to decrease the suicide rates of veterans.
Yeah, well, I'll address this first, if that's okay, Alex. First of all, Stop Soldier Suicide is a great organization out of Raleigh-Durham. We exchange a lot of data with them. They rely on us a lot for the Florida data because we keep such significant and detailed data on veteran suicides within the Firewatch. We do that in parallel with the Watchstander program that I mentioned before, so we know where to build our network of community members able to recognize those signs. If we're building it in a place where there's no high risk of suicide, we're wasting our time. So we spend all of our time building that network in the places where we have the highest risk. And to address your data question, over 6,000 U.S. military veterans die by suicide every year. In the state of Florida, it's over 600. Here in Northeast Florida, when the five of us got together and started thinking about how we're going to drive veteran suicide prevention back in 2019 and early 2020, there were 81 veteran suicides in the 5-county region of Northeast Florida. The Stop Soldier Suicide is exactly right. We are, I think you mentioned 72% higher. We always roughly quote that a veteran is likely to die by suicide at a rate of 1.5 to 2 times that of civilians. So their numbers almost exactly on par with what we see in the state of Florida.
And that brings another question to my mind then. Is it because of the military style? And I was never in the military, but from what I know of those who were, right? It's like you're trained to be a soldier, and so it's almost like your feelings don't matter, right? And I realize sometimes when you're in a battle, right, then you really got to we can rein those feelings in, right, and to address what's going on. But I get the impression that you're kind of in a situation where you feel like you can't share what you're feeling. Yeah, is that accurate or?
It is. I would say, and I'll address this and then let Alex, who's a licensed mental health counselor, address it in detail. But I would say that the issues that drive veteran suicide are very similar to issues that drive civilian suicide, although exacerbated in civilians. And that would be any kind of sense of loss. When you leave the service and you have your loss of camaraderie, or you might have a financial sense of loss, or you might have struggled with relationships during that transition and you have transition loss. You're seeking a new career, so there's other sorts of losses around that. You also have significantly more diagnosed or undiagnosed mental health issues. And very importantly, and this is one that we're all actively aware of in the veteran suicide prevention community, and that is that 74% in the state of Florida and over 70% of suicides nationally are with a firearm. So veterans are more likely to use a firearm, and a firearm is more likely to complete a suicide. So all those are reasons why the veteran suicide rate is higher among veterans, suicide rates higher among veterans than civilians. But I'll turn it over to the expert over here.
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with a couple of statements that you just made where, there's a stigma related to mental health, and I think it's even more severe in the military community for various reasons. But because there is that negative stigma, folks are not getting treatment earlier. They're waiting until later when things are more significant issues, which leads to higher rates of suicide. We also see a higher percentage of folks from the military who experience depression, anxiety, PTSD. 7% of weterans are actually diagnosed with PTSD, and those are just the folks that are seeking treatment and getting that diagnosis. We're continuing to see mental health issues across the board, but you were mentioning with transitions out of the military and that loss of sense of identity and camaraderie, that's a huge deal. At our clinic, we try to do some things that other than just mental health treatment, we have family engagement activities that we do. So we try to engage families and veterans without a clinical lens, so they feel more comfortable just coming into the clinic, so that once they are in the clinic doing maybe a family movie night or a craft night or, just something with the family, that they feel more comfortable with us as human beings at the clinic, and then maybe more likely to seek treatment.
Yeah, that's a great approach. One of the things, so we have what's called an integrated memory enhancement program, and it's for those who are in the early stages of dementia. And one of the things that we have found is, when they first come to the class, they're kind of apprehensive, right? Because there's a stigma that is out there. People don't know really how to respond and interact with people with dementia, right? And so, these people come into our program, and unfortunately, like, they might have family that's kind of like, don't know how to respond to them anymore, or friends, and so they come into our program and they're around others who are dealing with the same thing, right? And they kind of they're able to let their guard down, right? And they become more comfortable, and the person with dementia, they start engaging with the others, the caregivers, they get to know one another, and there's just this camaraderie, right? And so I think that approach of breaking those barriers down so that folks feel comfortable before you dive into the treatment, I think that's a great approach.
There's another interesting concept that I think differentiates veterans from civilians, and that is when folks go to boot camp, regardless of what service they're in, they're kind of, their identity's broken down and they become part of the team, and they're taught not to be the weak link on the team. You don't want to be the one who doesn't shine the shoes, because then the whole squad suffers, So you're taught not to be the weak link. And in general, I think the service members, veterans, are taught not to ask for help. So there is a stigma that has to be broken down. I mentioned before that we do training in person or online, and I have folks in the key areas around the state who are full-time doing training around their respective regions. My gentleman here in Northeast Florida, Doug I'll talk about it.
Yeah. Hold that thought there. That music means it's time for our next break. We'll be right back after these messages. And welcome back to a weekly radio show, the St. Johns County Council on Aging, here on WFOY 102.1 FM, your local radio station for news, sports, and talk. I'm Brian Robinson, Program Director for COA. Next week on the show, we will have Casey Bridges, Victoria Hapner, and Valerie Duquette with the Continuum of Care. They'll be in the studio to discuss the services that we provide to the homeless population of St. Johns County. So tune in next week, same place, same time, right here on WFOY 102.1 FM. My guests this morning are Nick Howland, the Executive Director of the Firewatch, and Alex Field, Clinic Director of the Stephen A. Cohen Military Family Clinic at Centerstone in Jacksonville, Florida. And in the previous segment, we were talking about suicide prevention. And Nick, you had a story that you wanted to share before the commercial came on.
I did. It was related to veterans not wanting to show weakness, not wanting to ask for help, and we're making everyone wait with bated breath with that commercial break. So now the story better be good, right?
Exactly.
Basically, I have a trainer in Northeast Florida. He's a Marine. His name is Derek Collins, and he tells this story about how when he was in infantry school as a Marine, his company was called to one part of Camp Lejeune that was on the whole other side of the camp. So his squad didn't have a vehicle. They had to kind of put on their packs and start hiking over there. While they were doing it, those 5 or 6 guys hiking along the road, another squad came by in an armored personnel carrier, stopped a few hundred yards ahead of them, and then backed up. They had been looking at that and probably felt pretty jealous that squad had a ride in the back of a car. And from the armored personnel carrier, the squad leader yelled out, "Hey, you guys want to ride?" And the squad on the side of the road looked at their squad leader kind of forlornly, and the squad leader looked at them and said, "Marines don't ask for help, but if offered help, they take it." Which I think just kind of highlights just the difficulty of veteran suicide, and service members with the stigma of asking for help when they have mental health issues. That's why at the Firewatch, we have trained through our Watchstander program members of the community out there able to recognize the signs and offer help to veterans who are suffering.
Okay, that's fantastic. That's a great story to tie in with what you do. So I just want to ask this. I mean, so both of you are up in the Jacksonville area. So services and programs that you provide, are they available to veterans in St. Johns County?
So the Cohen Clinic, services are available for St. Johns County. We serve the entire state of Florida through telehealth services, which some folks are actually telling us that they prefer telehealth services. They're confidential. We have folks that are licensed in Florida as well as surrounding states. So if you have folks in Georgia, family members, we can serve them as well. We also try to break down any barriers. So if transportation is an issue, even if you're in St. Johns County, if you'd like to come see us in person, within 40 miles of the clinic, we offer Uber transportation services. We also offer childcare during certain hours of the week. So if that's a barrier that's going to keep you from seeking treatment, we try to break that down for you so that you are able to access treatment. And then last thing, we do have we have a fund that helps cover if anybody has an inability to pay for services for any reason. So whether that's the full cost of services or just your copay for treatment, we have something that covers that.
Okay, and so do you take insurance then that folks have?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, we take insurance.
All right. And then also another question that comes to my mind is, what about evening hours? Like maybe there's somebody that's working 8 to 5, they can't get away from their job. Do you offer things in the evening? We
do. We have 2 late nights that we work until 7, so we have a little bit of late night hours, and that's actually when we have the childcare as well. So yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and the Firewatch was basically founded in Northeast Florida. St. Johns County was one of the founding counties. We started as a government organization supported by Duval, Baker, Clay, Nassau, and St. Johns counties. Before we then reformed as a 501c3 to go statewide. So St. Johns County has always been central to our veteran suicide prevention efforts. In fact, St. Johns County has one of the highest number of watchstanders trained of all the 67 counties in the state of Florida. Duval, St. Johns, and now through our expansion, Hillsborough, Pinellas, Brevard, Broward, and now rapidly growing out in the Panhandle. But St. John's was an early adopter of our program. We have lots of watchstanders here standing by to be vigilant to the concerns of veterans.
Well, that's exciting. St. John's, you said, is number 1?
Yeah, it's not number 1. Duval County has more, but that's based on population. Duval County is about 1,000 watchstanders out of the 10,000.
All right, so we're number 2.
Number 2.
All right, we'll take number 2. All right, well, that's fantastic. I'm glad that anybody that's listening today, either themselves or if they have a loved one that they know of, they can reach out to you and get the services that you provide. What would be the best way for them to reach out to each of your organizations?
So the easiest way would probably be to go to coheninthecommunity.com. So that's COHEN in thecommunity.com. That will give you access to any of the groups, events, things that are happening with our organization, as well as the contact information. So our address, phone number, and everything is on there.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, you visit thefirewatch.org. So thefirewatch.org. That's the best way to either go in and take our watchstander training online yourself, or if you're a business or organization and you want us to come train your group, you can sign up for it there too. It's the best way. We're not a call center or a clinic. What we do is we go out and we train community members, and you can get access to that training at thefirewatch.org.
Okay. And before we go into the next topic, I just want to stay on the topic of suicide prevention for just a moment. And off the air, you were mentioning some of the statistics for St. Johns County. And so last year, I think you said we had about a dozen or so.
In the last recorded year, which we get our data from the Florida Department of Health, and we can look at it by county, you had 11 veteran suicides in St. Johns County. Yep. And half of those, 5 of the 11, were in the, I want to say it's 32084. Is that the
32084 zip code?
Yep, the zip code that's in St. Augustine and west of St. Augustine, which allows us, because we can actually sort our data not only by county but by zip code. We can also sort it by age, race, gender, and how they died by suicide. It allows us to focus growth of our Watchstander program there. So we have been working on reaching out to businesses to train their employees in the 32084 area code in the last year, and trying to grow our network there. And we've had significant growth. St. Johns County is by far a county that cares about veterans. So there's so many folks and businesses that want to do more than just thank a veteran for their service. They want to get involved with us and step off the sidelines in the fight to end veteran suicide. It's been a wonderful early adopter. Yeah,
we have a fantastic sheriff, Robert Hardwick, and he was in the studio with me last week. He also serves on our board of directors for Council on Aging. He himself is a veteran.
He is, and he's trained. Sheriff Hardwick has had his folks go through our Watchstander training several times. So he's invited us in to train the sheriffs.
Yeah, and so then your other goal was to train business owners and I would assume their employees so that they too could be on the lookout for anybody that's needing some help.
Exactly, and we do it for free. We'll bring lunch and train your employees. It's to us the important thing is building that Watchstander network in places that it matters most. And so we find that around Northeast Florida, we just reached about 200, we call them veteran safe places. If you train 50% of your employees, or 50, whichever is smaller, we'll make you a veteran safe place. We'll go out on social media, talk about you, send you a certificate, all that kind of things. And what that means is that this business cares about veterans.
All right, we're going to continue our conversation right after these messages. We'll be right back. And welcome back to the weekly radio show, the St. Johns County Council on Aging here in Sweet Home, St. Johns County. I am Brian Routson, Program Director for COA, joined this morning by Nick Howland, the Executive Director of the Firewatch, and Alex Field, who is with the Stephen A. Cohen Military Family Clinic. And we've been talking about a lot of great services and programs that you provide for our veterans. And I'd like to, in this last segment, talk about homelessness. In 2023, a little over 20,000 veterans were living in shelters throughout the United States. Another 15,500 were living without any shelter at all. And it just breaks my heart that those who served in our armed forces have no place to live. And so my question would be, how are you helping homeless veterans, and are there government programs or nonprofits that assist veterans with housing?
So at the Cohen Clinic, I think one thing to note first is that there are folks that are in shelters or not even in shelters, but there's also folks living in their cars. There's folks living on people's couches, kind of couch surfing between different homes. So there's a large population of these folks. So when they're seeking treatment with the Cohen Clinic, one way that we can support is through our case manager. Her name is Diane. She's lovely. But what she does is she's aware of all of the resources in the community. And what she can do is connect veterans with those resources. And some of those can include housing, but also like food banks or legal aid or different barriers that can also affect whether or not they have housing. For example, if financial issues are the reason for not having housing, if there's a way to get them to food banks so that they're not spending that money there, they're using it for housing. We try to be creative in the ways that we support veterans. But there are a couple of organizations in the Northeast Florida region that do serve veterans and housing. For example, 5-Star Veterans and Women Veterans Ignited, both are agencies or organizations that can support.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, thanks, Alex. That's great info. And to your question, Brian, the one place that the VA has done a pretty decent job, not as good a job as they can, because homelessness is always going to be a pervasive issue, but is in trying to prevent veteran suicide through housing our homeless veterans. We know that homeless veterans are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than veterans who aren't facing housing challenges. And the VA has programs to house homeless veterans that they partner with HUD, called the HUD VASH program. They've got grants they do to communities through supportive services for veterans' families. They call that SSVF. But it's also imperative on communities to keep their veterans housed and do their job to house veterans. It's interesting. I have a trainer at the Firewatch who's responsible for training businesses, organizations on the Watchstander program and to be veteran safe places out in the Panhandle. And he was actually homeless earlier in his career, right after he left the service. And he was in Los Angeles. They have a veteran housing program locally where they take veterans off the street, qualify them by looking at their DD-213, and then start getting them supportive services through the VA, get them a VA disability rating, get them into mental health services if they need to. He got back on his feet, got a job. He's been remarkably successful. And here in St. Johns County, we actually have a great program that another all-star veteran advocate in the state of Florida, Bill Dudley, who's here in St. Johns County, helped start with the St. Johns County Veterans Council, and that's Veterans Village. I'm not sure how aware of anyone is of that, but the Old Town Inn, they basically got grant money to convert that to a Veterans Village, where they do the same thing that I was explaining happened to my guy out in Los Angeles. They take homeless veterans, they house them, and they start giving them kind of full-on support, get them reintegrated back in society, steady jobs, mental health treatment, back as productive members of society. And I think the Veterans Village, which is now, I think, just under a year old, is doing a great job. So hats off to St. Johns County Veterans Council.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So let me jump into this next question. There's numerous national, state, local nonprofit organizations that exist. So I'm just wondering, what we find ourselves having to do sometimes if a senior comes to us and they need something that we don't provide, then of course we, say, oh, you need to go see such and such a place, right? And get them connected to them. So what other great organizations are out there, whether they're national, state, local, that you would recommend to a veteran?
Well, I would say right away, if you're a post 9/11 veteran, get registered as a warrior with Wounded Warrior Project, because they provide through life services. And the best part is they're headquartered right here in Northeast Florida. They're in Jacksonville off of Butler. But they're a national and even an international organization serving even our veterans overseas. They will do through life services for you, whole life services. I mean, they're basically will help you get a VA disability rating, find a career, help you through mental health. They're a wonderful organization. We also have headquartered right here in St. Johns County Canines for Warriors, which is a national organization which pairs veterans with PTSD, military sexual trauma, or TBI with service dogs. And they passed recently their 1,200th veteran paired with service dog, and they're not stopping. So we brag that we hit 10,000 watchstanders. Well, they're years before us, and hitting 1,200 service dogs is and veterans paired with them is a remarkable accomplishment for them. So hats off to canines.
And it makes you proud to live in Northeast Florida, to hear of such great organizations that are having a national and even an international impact.
Absolutely.
Thank you for bringing up Canines for Warriors. We actually have a clinician who is stationed at their location to help folks who are either on their wait list or have already gotten a service dog through Canines for Warriors. Some other organizations that are in our area would be Blue Star Families, that could help with with career support and community connection, as well as Operation New Uniform. They support folks who are transitioning out of the military. And then I mentioned Women Veterans Ignited, that can provide classes and support to veterans. And
the transition part is challenging, yes, right? Because especially if they've been in for a while, I mean, it becomes your identity. I think of myself, I was in ministry for a number of years, for about 15 years, and then got out of it. And so that was kind of my identity, right? And so that was difficult to kind of, go through that transition. And then, for our senior population that we serve, retirement, they look forward to that. And then, they kind of do some of the things on their bucket list. They travel some places that they want to go. And then after that, it's just kind of like, oh, now what, right? And Absolutely. So a lot of them come, they're involved with us, whether they're a participant or they're a volunteer, just because, for all those years, their identity was their career.
Absolutely.
And now that you've retired and now you've kind of lost that identity. So that is definitely something that everybody struggles with in life.
And the data shows that too. So nationwide, our largest count of veteran suicides are in the age group over age 55. And that's just because the population of veterans is significantly higher in the older age groups. But the largest rate is in the 18 to 34. And as the VA likes to point out, the highest risk time is in that first year of separation. So these organizations that Alex just pointed out are amazing. And Operation New Uniform, USO Pathfinder, those trying to provide better transition services to veterans are helping prevent veteran suicide and end it considerably. They're great partner organizations.
That's fantastic. Well, we got just like a minute or so left. What else would you like to talk about related to veterans?
I think something that's important just to note is that we mentioned the negative stigma that's keeping folks from seeking mental health treatment. But what I also hear is sometimes veterans will say that they feel like they're not bad off enough to get treatment, that maybe they're going to be taking resources from somebody else. But that's just simply not the case. We have immediate access to care at the Cohen Clinic. So if you feel like you are in need of any support, please reach out. It's at coheninthecommunity.com.
And I would just add that there's a role for everybody to play in the fight to end veteran suicide. You don't have to be a veteran. You don't have to be a veteran family member. You can go to thefirewatch.org. You can learn the warning signs. You can learn to ask the question. You can learn where to refer a veteran. And you can stand by to help. It takes just 30 to 40 minutes of your time. It's free. And 10,000 is just our starting point. We want to get to 25 as quickly as we possibly can because that's more people out there watching over our veterans.
All right, with that music's me, and it's time for our show to end. Thank you both for taking time to come out, making that long drive to come down here. Thank you both so much. All right, everybody, I hope that you'll tune in next week when we'll have Casey Bridges, Victoria Hapner, and Valerie Duquette with the Continuum of Care to talk about homelessness in St. Johns County. Have a great week, everybody.